Welcome back, Jeremy. Actually, I have a gift to you. So here at Mosaic, we believe in two things. We want authentic experience, authentic community, and experiencing Jesus. But also, if you're a new guest, we have a Starbucks gift card for you. So here's a Starbucks gift card. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you coming.
I deserve that. It's been a while. Thank you.
All right, so sabbatical. I'm not sure if people have heard the word sabbatical before. Outside of a lot of contexts other than church, I Googled what sabbatical was, and that's a deep and dark path. You start going into Greek and Hebrew. But basically, to summarize it for you guys, it means rest. So what did you do on your sabbatical, Jeremy and Ella?
Well, what did I...
Yeah, tell us about it.
Sabbatical. Well, it was... we had a lot of fun. At the beginning, we first went to Kenya for about 3 weeks. And that was an experience of a lifetime because we go there. It's full of nature. It's very wild. Yeah. We're driving past zebras and antelopes on our way to our cabin. We went on a safari for a little while, and we homeschool our kids. And it's like a science lesson in real life. It's like, that's a lion. That's a zebra. That's an elephant, a giraffe. Just a blessing for our kids. A really funny story about that. There was a group of missionaries that lived kind of where our cabin was. And so we're meeting different couples, and we were going to meet with this one couple at night. And we got a message from them in the afternoon and said, hey, we can't meet later tonight because our dog got in a fight with a monkey, and we got to go take the dog to get stitches. I was like, we are not in Dubai anymore. So we had a lot of fun there.
Did the dog win?
Yeah, so that was the small dog. And the small dog got in a fight with the monkey, and then the big dogs came later and killed the monkey. Yeah, I know. It's wild, I'm telling you.
Only in Africa.
So we got to experience that. In the U.S., we got to go to NASA. Being a pilot for so many years, that was pretty cool for me. We got to go, we had the benefit of a friend from Mosaic from years ago. And it's just kind of cool to see the impact of what has happened over time. She used to go to Mosaic, and she lives in Hawaii now, and she was getting baptized. And so she used some of her points and allowed us, our whole entire family, to fly to Hawaii to be with her at her baptism. So that was kind of God showing up and doing some really cool things for me and my family. But just like in life, you have some really good things, and then you have some things that, you kind of maybe like you moved here to Dubai, and you thought, this is exactly how it's going to go whenever I get to Dubai. And it doesn't go the way you expected, right? Well, that kind of happened to us in the United States. On day 2 of our arrival there, Ella got sick. On day 3, I got sick. It was an upper respiratory infection. She recovered in about a week and a half. Mine turned into bronchitis, which made me cough for 7 weeks. So I was in the United States for 12 weeks, coughing for 7 weeks, which was super annoying. And then I got COVID on the last week. So it was like 8 weeks out of the 12 weeks I was sick and just recovering. So did I get rest? Yeah. I got rest because I was just recovering on a bed for a lot of it. It was super annoying, honestly, but I did get rest. An interesting thing about that is that whenever we got back, and obviously, Ella, you were tired of me being sick. How did you feel after me coughing for 7 weeks? Tell me about that.
Miserable. I was asking him to confess, and confess since there because you're not healing. That was a family joke. I tell his dad, please ask him to confess because I'm done. So when we got back here, I scheduled a checkup with a pulmonologist through a friend. And then we found out that pastors, because of those weeks of coughing, his the lobe of his right lung had collapsed. And the doctor said there could be 3 reasons for that: a trauma, physical trauma from your history, or a tear in your muscle because of the long-term, severe coughing. And a tumor, and that the last word obviously made us panic a whole lot. And it's something that you don't want to hear in any doctor's appointment. And so this is serious. But also good news because we know what's going on. We wanted to dig deeper into the root of his illness. And so,
Yeah, it was interesting because we went to the pulmonologist that day, and I was like, I feel fine. I feel normal. Like, I don't feel anything different. And I was like, I was just going to this pulmonologist to make Ella happy, basically. And while we were there, I found out, no, actually something was wrong with me. I got a picture of it. Take a look at this. It's freaky. Yeah, exactly,
So,
right.
he's
That
So
was,
is the one on the right the normal one?
yeah, that So that's what we did a CT scan a little bit later on, and that's what we found out, that I had half of my right lung, and I was like, what is going on? That freaked me out a little bit, as you can imagine. But the good news is, well, I'll tell you a quick little story. So we find out on Friday afternoon is that, right? And then Friday evening, we'd already scheduled a time with the executive committee that helps kind of govern Mosaic. And while we were there, I didn't even have to ask for it. They brought it up themselves, but I was going to ask for it. I was like, can you pray for me? Because this has just happened. And so they prayed for me that night. Come to church here the next day, and I'm singing, and I'm talking to a lot of people, and it's loud, and so I'm like having to talk loud, and like my lung was a little bit tired maybe later in the day. But it's interesting because later that night, I've always checked my O2 meter, my blood O2, because when I had COVID, you're supposed to do that. And it's always reading 96 when I was in the United States during COVID. And I was like, that's kind of strange. Normally it's 99. I didn't know what was happening. And then whenever that night, I saw it climb from 96 to 97 to 98. I was like, well, maybe something's changing. So there's a verse in James I want you guys to see here. It says, is anyone among you sick? Let them call on the elders of the church and pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. And that's what I did on Friday night. And on Saturday, my lungs started to heal. So, yeah, amazing. So I want you to know that if you're here, this is a community, right? If you're here and you're going through something tough, you need healing, you need something, come to us. We want to pray for you. We love you. You are heard, you're seen, and we care for you. We just want to let you know that as a church.
Yeah, wow. So what I heard from that is obviously pray, but also listen to your wife, right? Attend the doctor's appointment. Yeah. All right. So we talked a bit about your sabbatical, and we mentioned a little bit about Mosaic. What was if I wind back the clock, I joined Mosaic in 2018. But I believe the origin story of Mosaic was a little bit earlier to that. And so what made you go on this crazy idea of starting a church instead of something else?
Well, it definitely is a little bit crazy, but I think it happened like a lot of maybe start of churches. I attended another church that inspired me. That was like, wow, I've never done church this way before. And then I want other people to experience this as well. It's actually happened here at our church at Mosaic. Paul and Yuka, they're from Hong Kong. They've since moved back to Hong Kong recently, but I got a text from them maybe 6 months ago and said, hey, Jeremy, I just want to let you know that what you're doing at Mosaic there in Dubai is making a difference. We've come back here to Hong Kong. We're telling everybody about how you've been doing church differently and how it's affected us. And we just want to let you know we're doing something that you're doing there in Dubai. So they did. Here's a picture of it. They did an at the table event in Hong Kong. So they sat around a table together and they had a meal. They shared a meal and they have conversations about Jesus. And so just like for Paul and Yuka, they saw something that they liked somewhere. It happened to me. I grew up as a pastor's kid, missionary kid. And I'd kind of seen a bunch of different types of churches, right? And the churches that I grew up in was the more confusing the sermon was, the deeper it was. And it really wasn't just deeper, it was just more confusing. And so I had kind of grown up in different churches. I went to this church called North Point Community Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And there, I just noticed that they gave their best for God in everything that they did. They had amazing worship, amazing sound. Everything was just organized and clear. And then the pastor got up and spoke, and he was very clear, and his sermons were very practical. I could take them home and use them that week, and it just made my life better. I joined a small group. I became a leader of a small group, and really my relationship with God grew the most during that time with that church. And so I wanted other people to experience what I had experienced. And so I moved to Dubai. 6 years later, God eventually opened up the doors for this new style of church, a church that was really going after the lost, a church that really cared about non-Christians and actually made decisions to try to get non-Christians to come and to show them Jesus in a different way. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show Jesus to lost people. And that's kind of what the passion came from for starting Mosaic years ago.
Interesting. So you had the idea, you wanted to start Mosaic. So you obviously can't do it alone, right? So I believe there was a first pastor. And if my sources are correct, there was a little bit of eavesdropping that was happening when the first pastor of Mosaic happened. So let's let everyone into the world or the mind of Ella.
Yeah.
Because that's a
I'd
special
love
place.
to share because that was one of the instances the Lord really showed up, and it's a part of one of the many God stories in Mosaic. And this is how it happened. Jeremy's sister and her best friend, Patricia, were visiting Dubai, and then we hosted them in our house. We just had so much fun together. And at the time, we were attending a different church. You know, whenever you move to Dubai and you kind of like you're impacted by your home church, you are looking for the same type of church, but you have a hard time, finding exact same. So you go to the closest, And so we ended up with attending this church. I took them there. They had so much fun. That afternoon, we decided to have brunch. My first and only brunch, experience in Dubai. That's 12 years ago. And then we decided to sit in the very corner of the restaurant. And then, we were talking about the worship experience. This is, I love it, multicultural. It's feels like heaven, like different races worshiping God, good preaching and all that. Yeah. And then they started to ask me, oh, okay, Ella, you've lived in Dubai 2 years, and then how do you find living here? And then I tell them my experience, and then I mentioned to them, but Jeremy has like a bigger desire in his heart to start. We love this church that we are attending, that we are members and volunteers, but Jeremy also has this itch or like this desire to start, a different type of church. And I told them about this. We started investing and saving for this ministry, started talking to friends if they want to, come alongside and join and say, oh, that sounds interesting, but it's such a big concept. How do we do this? And we said, I know it's a big concept. We don't know where to start, but we just know that we have some structures in place already. Jeremy knows some systems and process, but he didn't want to be a pastor. So at this point, we want to have a pastor. We just want to have a pastor. We thought that was the first step to starting a church, is to have a pastor at the time. And so they said, okay, sorry, I take it back. Before that brunch, the night before, I mentioned the same thing about starting a church, and they said, Patricia's like, let's go pray for that pastor. If that's what you need, let's go pray right now. So we prayed in our living room that night, praying for a pastor. The next morning, we worshiped at this church. We had brunch. And during that brunch time, we were talking about, again, starting this church. And little did we know that there was a family seated behind us with a newborn. And then they started eavesdropping our conversation. And then they heard the name of the church that we were wanting to, the style that we were trying to start. And then the husband was started to listen, to our conversation. They thought we were bashing the church. It's like, oh, maybe they're, saying bad things about this church. But we were not. So the wife is like, stop listening to theirs. Stop what you're doing. Just let them talk. But probably it was the volume of our voice. We were excited. We were talking about it. And it came to a point that the husband couldn't help himself anymore. He showed up at our table, and then he said, ladies, I'm so sorry to interrupt your conversation. I really don't, I've been hearing about the name of this church, and I'm curious to know if you're talking about the same church that I know. And I said, yeah, we want to start this kind of church inspired by this church in the States. we're just at this point looking for a pastor to lead us because my husband doesn't want to be the pastor. He is not the pastor material, and so he was like, "What do you mean you want to start a church?" I said, "Yeah, we want to start a church. We have everything, just looking for the leader." And he was like, "I'm sorry, ladies, but I just have to move to your table and join your conversation because Jeff Galzinis, the guy who was eavesdropping our conversation, 2 years prior to coming to Dubai, he was being trained to be a campus pastor of a church plant of this mother church, but then he shelved that plan to lead a church because they wanted to move to Dubai, earn some money, and pay off debts as a family. And so whenever he said that, I can't believe, like, the job that I said no to, that I trained for but said no to, is like here right now. And so Jeff Galzinis became our first pastor ever in Mosaic. He came to Dubai as a Black Hawk helicopter pilot. That's him. Black Hawk helicopter pilot training the UAE military. Yeah, so that brunch encounter turned into many other conversations, and we knew that the Lord wanted him to lead Mosaic. So that's him.
Wow, so the first pastor of Mosaic was a Black Hawk fighter pilot.
Yes.
Did you guys ever know that? Isn't that cool? Like, where else can that happen in the world? Fun fact, I also know Jeff, and not only has he done that, he was also working in Washington as a Black Hawk pilot that was only training for a nuclear event. So in the event that a nuclear bomb had been triggered, he was paid every single day to train to fly into Washington, even though that never happened.
Yeah.
What an origin story, no?
Yeah.
Isn't that special? Isn't that
so
special?
true. Yeah,
So,
very special.
So Jeremy, Ella always has exciting, crazy things. If we open up her mind, it's always, you never know what you're going to find, right? So when she came and told you that story, what was your thoughts? Were you just questioning?
Well, I was shocked because I was away. I was a pilot for Emirates. I had been away on an overnight during this time. I was not there. And I come back and she's telling me, hey, there's this guy who's trained to be a North Point campus pastor. He's here in Dubai. And by the way, the night previously, we were praying for a pastor to come. It's like, I was just like blown away by what God was doing. I was like, God brought us a pastor the day after you prayed. I was just like, this is God. This is God. And I think what encouraged me is that God's hand was on Mosaic, that God had something special planned for Mosaic from the very beginning. And if you're here today, I want to encourage you with this, is that just think about this. So Jeff was being trained to be a pastor 2 years before he ever moved to Dubai. He was being trained. God was working with Jeff 2 years prior to that. And then he had to apply to get the job here in Dubai. He had to get accepted. He had to move his family halfway around the world. And then he had to show up at the same place where my wife and sister and friend were having lunch at and sit at the table right next to them. God was working on that prayer on that Friday night for years before it ever happened. So I want you to know, if you're here today and you're frustrated, you're depressed, you're mad, like things aren't going, God, I don't see you working, I just want you to know that God is working in the background, and when the time is right, he's going to show up. He's going to show off for you, so you can look back and be like, wow, God, wow. So that was really encouraging for me as a pastor.
Oy, here we go. So you've got the pastor, you've got the resources. Now it's, I guess, showtime. Mosaic's first service. I'm not sure if you can, the date to remember it, but just maybe you even have a picture. I'm not sure. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, it was Christmas. We was like, when should we start church? Well, Christmas is a great time. So it was Christmas 2013, believe it or not, like 11 years ago, 11 years ago.
Look
so
at
this
that.
was our very first service.
That's some powerful lights.
Yes, I know.
It's a small room.
I showed
Lots of
that
lights.
to Alwyn earlier this week, and it's like, wow, you look better then than we do now. I was like, but you see, I came from that culture of giving my best to God. I wanted to give my best for God. So we had really good lights. We had really good sound. Every single musician that was playing on the first night was a professional musician. I was like, we gave our best for God in what we did. And so, yeah, this was our very first church service, December 2013. And then, like I said, I didn't want to be a preacher. Jeff really didn't want to be that much of a preacher either. What a lot of the North Point campuses did was they had video preaching. So this is what our preaching looked like. So it was like 2 side screens and this big, huge center screen with Andy Stanley preaching. So we've changed a lot in between now and then, but it was a really good experience. And I just want to say that sometime, we were giving our best for God at the very beginning, but sometimes our best isn't really the best because we just don't know. We don't know everything, and so we made things look good. We made things sound good. We had a lot of just great things going, but we put too much attention on the physical things and not enough attention on the people. And so we grew our church from about 50 to about 50. A couple years later, we grew it from 50 to about 30.
I think that's when I joined.
Yeah.
I remember it was 20.
Yeah.
Let's go with 30.
So we definitely took us a while to kind of learn our lessons on how to do church. But we did that for a while, and eventually it was really sad because Jeff, our first pastor, he was a helicopter instructor pilot. His contract ended, and so Jeff had to end up moving to Taiwan, and so we lost our very first pastor. And we went without a pastor for a couple years. And eventually, God, through a series of steps, through a series of unusual circumstances, I like to say, shared with me or told me that he wanted me to quit my job at Emirates to be a pastor. And so I figured, okay, God, if this is really what you want me to do, I need to go tell my wife. And so I'm sure she's pregnant with our second kid at the time. She's going to be super excited about that. Let me go tell her.
Wow. So you're working at Emirates. I believe you were a captain at the time. You had full medical benefits. You also have flight benefits. And so, Ella, you're about to have flight benefits and medical benefits taken away. What was your reaction?
I said that's definitely not God. Because I'm more spiritual than you. I'm sure in my discernment it's not God. And so when Jeremy said, I'm feeling this stirring in my heart that God wants me to quit, flying and become a pastor. I said, that's great. But we have to pray, to pray about if you really should, because he was really convinced. And I am not, on board with it, because obviously the fear, like, you're resigning, but this church can't pay you. There's only 30 of us. How can, this doesn't make sense. How can you live in an expensive city? We won't have a visa, no salary, no nothing. And so Jeremy's like, I know, right? Nothing. You could tell it's God because it doesn't make sense. So if things make sense in your life, probably God is not there. It doesn't make sense, and it's like risky and terrifying. You could tell that God is up to something in your life. And so we prayed about it, and then and through by reading my own quiet time, I received a word from the Lord that became for us a moment of truth, and that's when we made the decision to go full time, in the ministry. That's 7 years ago.
Wow. I think we can appreciate that. That's a special moment, right? When you give everything away. So yeah, I mean, so you guys said yes a lot, right? And I think that yes has impacted a lot of people. And when I think back about when I first joined in 2018, it was about 30 odd people. I remember when I came, I came to Dubai in 2018. And I knew I had to be in a church. So if any of you know me, I'm very methodical, I'm very analytical. And I wanted a church, I believe God had called me to be in a different place for a different reason. And so I wasn't want to go back to what I was used to. So there's many churches that I was used to before. So I went online. I wanted a church with a digital platform because that was important to me. So I made sure that I found one that had a digital presence. And I found 4 churches. One didn't reply on Instagram, so they were out. And then there were 3 churches that we went. And I remember coming to Mosaic, and it was a bit bizarre because I walked in and they were playing games. They had that mouth game that you guys played. You guys probably don't know this, but as a bit of an icebreaker at Mosaic, they had these games on stage, and the mouth game puts like I don't even know what you call a mouthpiece in your mouth, and you try to say something. And that was my first introduction. I was like, oh.
This is not a church.
This is not church. This is not church. And it was a small community, but then it was so different. And I think that's what I saw that was different. I think that's what God, resonated with me, that your yes to creating something different. And so if I then think of what attracted me to to Mosaic as a church, the services were short, which is great. After coming from long services, it was fun and engaging. But I think what was more important was it's not just about attraction, it's what keeps you there, right? Because we can be attracted to many things, but what's your ability to stay? And I think the learnings that you took from the beginning years of production into people transit, and that's what made me stay. There's not many pastors that I know, you message them and you're new to the church and you're like, I would like to come to your Connect group. And then like, yes, sure, come. They give you a location. But Jeremy went out of his way. He picked me up from the metro and he dropped me home and things, that really blew me away. And I think that culture in Mosaic of going an extra mile, that there's no distance between you and the pastor. The pastor is just a person, and they love people just as much as everyone loves everyone. And I hope you feel that culture here in Mosaic, because that's really what attracted me here. I say, by you saying yes, me and Isabel didn't just find a church. We found a God-given purpose. Many of us come to Dubai for tax-free salaries and advancement. We found purpose. But you guys saying yes, we found memories and friendship, And by you saying yes, more than anything, we found a home, And that home is a place that continues till today with our Connect group in TNT. And that group has grown now. It's now, from one group, it's grown now into almost 4 groups,
Amazing.
And that is your legacy, I remember when Peter was on that, Lara was many of you won't know Lara, she helps with the finances. Lara was our first Connect group leader. And there were days that she would say, like, Ian, it's just me and you. And Isabel, should we continue Connect Group? And I was like, no, we have to be faithful because we care about people. And that faithfulness has come. And you see Connect leaders now in OJ and Tito, which is now extended into Fatin. We've got Gab and Rowan that has come from TNT. And that's all because of the culture that you set, your care and your love for people. So that's really exciting. Yeah.